hands are his feet.
Welcome to the teaching ministry of Calvary Chapel Corinth with Senior Pastor Charlie Villard. We're an expositional teaching church with a mission to comfort those in any affliction with the comfort in which we ourselves have been comforted by God. We're glad to have you join us today, so let's open up our Bibles and begin our verse-by-verse study in God's Word.
Last week was like I said, it was a huge blessing. Last week I fell and broke my nose, and then we baptized 7 people. It was awesome. We finished up chapter 9, I think, the week before, talking about Noah and his family, and then the sin of Ham and all that went on with his father's nakedness, and we talked about wine and being drunk, right, and then being sober in the Spirit and being sober in the Lord. So we're going to kick off in chapter 10. This is popularly called the Table of Nations. So at this point now, coming post-flood, we're going to talk about how the world was actually filled with people. So Genesis chapter 10, verse 1. Now this is the genealogy of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and the sons were born to them after the flood. The sons of Japheth were Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshach, and Tyrus. The sons of Gomer were, there's a bunch of these names. I'm not even going to attempt. You can read them. So we have the sons of Gomer. We have the sons of Javan, Elisha, Tarshish, Kittim. And then going on into verse 5, these are the coastland peoples of the Gentiles were separated into their lands, everyone according to his language, according to their families and into their nations. So we're going to kick into the Tower of Babel in a few minutes, but we continue on with chapter 10, verse 6. The sons of Ham were Cush, Mizraim, Put, and Canaan. The sons of Cush were Seba, Havilah, Sabata, Rama, Sabachthah, and the sons of Rama were Sheba and Dedan. Cush begot Nimrod. So in this whole lineage, Noah's lineage, we're talking about his sons and then all that came from that. For the most part, this chapter itself doesn't really deviate from just giving the lineage. It is not a complete and total one. It's enough to show, us as believers, right, and us, how did the lands get settled? How did we get people where they were? And ultimately, how did we get to the line of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and then David, and then Jesus, our Savior? So he veers off, though, here, because he says, the Cush begot Nimrod, and he began to be a mighty one on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. This sounds like a compliment. It is not. Nimrod will ultimately create the nation of Babylon, and his lineage will have the fall from the Tower of Babel. But it's an interesting one. It's really, the way that it's titled, it would sound glorious. It's really an insult, because he was a hunter of men, a hunter against God, not a hunter of animals, and a great man of the Lord. It says in the beginning of his kingdom was Babel. His son Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. From that land he went to Assyria and built Nineveh. We know that popular name from the story of Jonah. Rehoboth, Ir, Kala, and Rezin. Between Nineveh and Kala, that is the principal city. And then there's going to be a bunch of begots. So we're going to continue through the line. He's going to give the line of all of the children. In 13, we can read. I'll butcher the name. So an interesting one is Canaan. He begot Sidon, his firstborn, and Heth. Canaan we know as what they would settle in what we know today is as the area of Israel. Actually, I took some notes here, looking through some of the commentaries. So some of the names that are important and how they sort of, before they start to actually go through the lineage, the sons and where they came from. The sons of Japheth, it says he was the father of Indo-European peoples, those stretching from India to the shores of Western Europe. They are each linked by linguistic similarities that often seem invisible to the layman but are much more obvious to the linguist. Gomer, from this son of Japheth came the Germanic people, from whom most of the original peoples of Western Europe, these include the original French, Spanish, and Celtic settlers. Magog, that would probably sound familiar, Tubal and Meshech, those are out of Europe, the Russian areas, Magog being Russia, Meshech popularly translated the word Moscow, the northern Asian population of people. Madai, from this son, Japheth, came from the ancient Medes. And they populated what is now Iran and Iraq. The peoples of India also came from this branch of Japheth's family. Javan, the son of Japheth, came the ancient Greeks. So what we would consider what would be the seafaring ways of the Greeks. In Genesis 10:5 it talks about. When it comes to the sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, from this son came the peoples who settled north of Judea into what we call the Fertile Crescent, so northern parts of the Judean lands. Togarma, from this son of Gomer came the Armenians. In verses 4 and 5, the sons of Javan, when it starts to go through that, the sons of Javan, geographic names that spring from these names is in this chapter abound. Linguists have no trouble seeing the connection between Kittim and Cyprus, Rodanum and Rhodes, Gomer and Germany, Meshech and Moscow, Tubal and Toblisk. Everyone according to his language, according to their families into these nations. These divisions of mankind developed into languages and genetic and ethnic things. So, what's interesting is most people will say the world started from where? Africa. But it didn't. The world started from near the nation of Israel, right? And settled out from there. What we find is, as he talks about this languages, where they go and what they end up becoming is adapting to their environments, right? And then they come up with their own languages, their own ways to communicate. What we might call, like a southern drawl. You could go and talk to someone, when they're from the South because they sound like it. They come from different areas. Yeah, we all speak a form of English, probably not really good English. I certainly don't. But the same thing happens here. As these people spread out and create their own nations, they're adapting to their environments, their languages, they're having certain things that are particular to their area. Continuing on through 15, verse 15 and chapter 10, he again goes through sort of this bloodline. In 19, it says, "In the border of the Canaanites was from Sidon as you go towards Gerar, as far as Gaza. Then as you go towards Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, as far as Lasha. These were the sons of Ham according to their families, according to their languages and their lands and all their nations." In 21, "And children were born also to Shem, the father of the children of Eber, the brother of Japheth the elder. The sons of Shem were Elam, Ashur, Arphaxad, nice, Lud, and Aram. The sons, he's going to continue on to Eber, were born two sons. What we actually are building is the line of the lineage up to Abraham, as we're kind of going through this. Continue on, more names that I'll butcher. In verse 30, "And their dwelling place was from Mesha, as you go towards Sephar, the mountain of the east. These were the sons of Shem, according to their families, according to their languages, according to their lands, and according to their nations. These were the families of the sons of Noah, according to their generations, in their nations, and from these nations were divided on the earth after the flood." So as we have this table of nations, the science community, it's like we as Christians, right? The science community would say, well, no, carbon dating and all these things, right? These show that this land came first, this land came second. God has given us how the lands were settled coming out of what would be really the center of God's earth, the nation of Israel. So as they've settled, they've gone off, they've created their own communities, their own nations, their own structures, likely their own laws, how they behave. It doesn't make mention in here that that some of them or any of them were really following after the Lord, though we know there will be times that occurs. However, as we dig into chapter 11, verse 1, "Now the whole earth had one language and one speech." Sounds like this will be a great thing, right? Because when the Antichrist comes back, He's going to unify us under all, well, us, maybe not you and me, hopefully, but people under one government, right? And there, it could be one language, it could be one unified thing. The problem we have here is, as we continue into 2, it came to pass as they journeyed from the east, and they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. Then they said to one another, "Come, let us make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They had brick for stone, and they had asphalt for mortar. And they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower whose top is in the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth." As we see this gathering and this sort of unified way of communicating, what also seems to come along with that is the enemy's great use of how can we be like God. And what they decide to do is build this tower to the heavens so they can look about the land, be above the land, and be in the sky close to where God would be. So they have some understanding of that. It says, "Come, let us build ourselves a city, a tower whose top is in the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves." They're concerned about the world knowing who they are. And we see this in modern church, right? We build these giant cathedrals, big giant towers, big giant churches that reach way up into the sky. From a practicality sense, if you're looking over a city, you drive out over Veterans Bridge in Bangor and you look, you can see where all the churches are, right? Big giant steeples, big buildings that stand amongst, above all the trees, amongst all the scenery. But does it really represent God is the question, right? It becomes more of a way to be seen, like much what they're doing here, right? It's not really any different. Not much has changed. Yeah, I'm trying to be careful because, there's a particular religion in general that likes to build giant buildings, right? And it becomes this massive structure, and it's awesome, right? It can be beautiful, much like the temple that Solomon built. But does it mean God dwells there? Right? It doesn't. It doesn't actually mean God dwells in that place at all. And that's the hard part. We when we come together as believers, the point is to glorify God, right? To meet with God, to glorify Him, to build up each other. What's the point in gathering if you don't believe in God? You're going to find ways of what? It's a rare occasion where a large group of people are talking about, how can we make the world a better place? A cult, for example, right? They're gathering to meet with God or whatever they call God, generally some man who's nuts, and they don't go, let's go out and help the community. Let's go and do this. They're not out for serving others. They're out for serving themselves. That's what these guys are doing. Ultimately, Nimrod and his family and his lineage. But as they're gathering together, they're all gathering for one purpose: to make a name for themselves and to be like God. And it says, "Lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth." So let's make one giant gathering place for all of us, where we can be people, we can have a name. In 5, "But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the sons of men had built." I love that. The Lord came down, right? No matter how high we go, we're not going to reach the Lord, and He's still going to have to come down to us. But He says to him, to Himself, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, let's go check out this tower that they've built. And the Lord said, "Indeed, the people are one, and they all have one language, and this is what they begin to do. Now nothing that they propose to do will be withheld from them." What's He saying? He's like, look, they indeed have one language and they've communicated together, but they've conspired, not to, raise a monument or a temple to God, to worship God. They've come together to make something work for them. This reminds me of prison, right? It's difficult when we say, look, the law of the land finds somebody guilty and sentences them to prison. And then they go to prison, and a lot of them don't live a real terrible life, especially people that were rich, right? They go into these country club type places where they'll live out the rest of their time in a not really difficult place. giving back to the rest of the community that they've hurt. But there's an aspect of it that makes sense if you really think about it. A group of men that have worked the law or broke the law or worked their will upon others for years or decades and been found guilty to been put in prison. If all of those minds come together and figure, how do we get better food? How do we get control over a guard? Their minds are bent towards, apart from Christ, are bent towards how do we get this place to serve us? And that's not what they're there for. They're there in servitude to serve out time for the crimes they've committed. But if you just throw a man in a cell, or you get these people in groups and they just start talking about all this stuff and they start griping, what happens? Dissent starts to grow, or they start to plot against the guards. So you have to keep them busy. People are like, why in prison do they have a pool table, or do they go out and they have work out and they do all this stuff? Because a group of criminals sitting together is nothing but trouble. It's actually what we find ourselves in here, right? This group of people have been blessed. The world's filling up, and they have freedom, and they decide to build something to use for their own good. And it can be frustrating to see a criminal spend his life in prison not really doing hard time. But at the same time, that person, all they're going to do is plot. So they give them activities. They work out. They do stuff. They have, they should be working. They should be paying back society. But if they don't have something and they're all communicating in this one way, right? They've spent a life of crime, and they start talking about it, and they start living in the glory days, and then they all of a sudden start wanting to do this and wanting to do that. And the drug problem, rape, things like that in prison are insane. Right? And there's guards that are involved in those things too. But if we don't keep a mind busy upon good things, it finds ways, which is, to me, the first 12 chapters of Genesis in its entirety are the case for the depravity of man. Right? We say the man is totally depraved and lost, and the world says no. Everyone's born good. And things just happen. It's just totally not true when we see it. So in 5, the Lord came down. He sees the city. He sees the tower that the sons of men have built. And he says, indeed, the people are one. They have one language. He says it as a confirmation, not, I don't think, necessarily as a compliment. He says, now nothing that they propose to do will be withheld from them. They'll do whatever now. In 7, come, let us, your Bible should be capitalized us, because it's the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, a picture of the Trinity here. Come, let us go down, and there confuse their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad, and from over the face of all of the earth they ceased building the city. Therefore, its name is called Babel. Would have come from the Hebrew word Baba or Baba. It's an interesting word. Ultimately, the name of one of Nimrod's sons, and really means nothing, right? Confusion or babble, right? You're just, you can't really say words. And, if we think about it, if you were to go to another country and have no idea how to speak a language, it would sound like babble to you. Right? You'd be like, I have no idea what you're saying. I don't even know how to communicate with you. But the people of that place, they can all communicate together. So God's separation of people by the separate languages was purposeful. They could no longer sit, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord scattered them abroad over the face of the earth. So they've gone to their nations, they speak different languages. The Lord's strategy was, if they're just going to get together and start trouble, then we'll move them out separate, and they can communicate within themselves. Shem's descendants in verse 10. This is the genealogy of Shem. Shem was 100 years old and begot, Arphaxad, 2 years after the flood. After he begot Arphaxad, Shem lived 500 years and begot sons and daughters. Arphaxad lived 35 years, begot Salah. We're going to continue on through a bunch of verses of this. We the place that I really want to get to with this one is in verse 24. Nahor lived 29 years and begot Terah, and after he begot Terah, Nahor lived 119 years and begot sons and daughters. Now Terah lived 70 years and begot Abram, Nahor, and Haran. This is the genealogy of Terah. Terah begot Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Haran begot Lot. So we see this connection of Lot and Abraham are cousins, right? That they are family. We know that later on. Obviously, in chapter 12, we won't get to that this week. We'll start in that, and I'm excited because Abraham's story, especially Abraham and Sarah, Sheena and I first read through the scriptures together as believers. We did a study. I didn't really understand how to read the Bible, right? And Sheena's like, just read from the beginning and start reading. And I read creation and was wowed by it. I could see the existence of the Trinity. I see God doing all that He's done, and it was like it all starts to make sense. And then we start reading about Abraham and Sarah, and we're going, man, this is like our life. We couldn't have a kid. They waited years. Abraham made so many bonehead mistakes with his wife, and the Bible started to become really real to us. And it's an awesome story. But Abram at this point, until God changes his name, and Lot are cousins, and they lived in the land of Ur of the Chaldeans. Then Abram and Nahor took wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, the daughter of Haran, of the father of Milcah, and the father of Ishka. But Sarai was barren, and she had no child. Man. As we read through this, what do we see? We see a lineage and a line of people carried on by having children. Don't really, up until this point, have a place where it says if someone was barren. It's possible that it occurred, and it's just not, here in the scriptures. But I think, in our culture, we're measured, men and women, by certain things. Women are measured by beauty, and physical beauty. Women are measured by attitude. Women are measured by the ability to produce children. And today, women are measured by, as well, their success in the working world. Women have rights. They can go and they make great workers. But men are measured by strength. How strong are you? That's when you were kids, right? I don't know. When I was a kid, you get in fights on the playground, or you're shoving, or you're arm wrestling, or doing something, right, to prove how strong you are. And you want to be the strongest kid on the playground. The problem is no matter how strong you think you are, there's always someone stronger. My dad always said that. He's like, look, be careful when you're playing with kids, and you're getting into fights, because even if you win a fight, the stronger kid, he's going to come along and want to make a statement by beating you up. If you just stay away from that, you'd be a lot better off. And so for me, I just stood by and watched all the kids get in fights and be like, yeah, that kid's pretty strong. Well, that kid's pretty strong. I thought he was strong, and that new kid is way stronger, right? And it was like the new kid comes to school, and they're like, hey, new kid, how strong are you? Where'd you come from? And, I had a kid who's like, oh, I came from New York. And they're like, whoa, that kid's he's going to be tough in New York. So you're measured by strength. Men are measured by their physical ability. Their success in the world, obviously, you can be measured by that. How much money you've made, how much possessions you have, how much, there's a gross part of the culture, how many kids you can bear, right? That's unfortunate, but people are, I have like 14 children. I don't take care of any of them, but I have 14 of them. There's this notion that if you're fertile, you're a real man. Rarely are men measured by intelligence, and I'm not the most intelligent person in the world. So, for me, I wasn't really successful in sports. I wasn't really successful in school. I didn't really do the things, like I was the least likely to succeed in like the yearbook. Graduated like I did 4th or 5th in my class. That to the bottom, not to the top, of course. And it's like the kid's going to do nothing. And I really thought the same thing. Like I'll probably do nothing but if I have a car and it's cool, then here's how I'll measure my manhood by getting stopped by the police as many times as I possibly can. And that's exactly what happened for the next like 2 or 3 years, right? Cars, window tint, exhaust, going fast, doing whatever I could do. And they'd be like, yeah, I got stopped like 87 times by the cops. But I wasn't, at that point, I'm not looking to have children. I don't know. There's something in me that I always knew. I just knew. And Sheena and I were having premarital sex, so we're not using a ton of protection. So at a certain point, you'd have an accident, and we never had an accident. We never had a scare, not in 20 years. We have like an oops or a uh-oh, we're in trouble. We just kept living on. But, that's the kind of stuff that started to eat away at me. Like, okay, I can't have kids. I'm not really that smart. I'm not overly successful, right? I'm good with computers. That is a gift. I'm appreciative of that. Everything up until this point, when they're spoken of, apart from Nimrod, and he's insulted, not complimented on being a mighty man of God, everything up until this point is a genealogy that's passed on from the Father to the Son. And it will continue on that way, right? But that line right there, verse 30, but Sarah was barren. She had no child. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 words. 8 words. And they're living hundreds of years. That's hundreds of years of pain and hurt. And likely Abraham's frustration that how am I ever going to carry on a lineage? How will I do the things that I'm supposed to? He was a wealthy guy. We'll come to find that he had all kinds of stuff, right? But he has to pass that on. And likely there's Sarai. She's barren, right? People talking about her. It's the woman that can't have kids. I like to think they were likely in love. It could have been an arranged marriage at this point, but I believe Abraham loved his wife a lot. He was scared. His wife was beautiful, even at her age. He's going to go on to make all kinds of mistakes, but I never go by verse 30 without ever thinking how much pain and hurt is wrapped up in that sentence. Because I know. I don't know. I didn't live 500, 600 years not having kids, but I get it. And Terah took his son Abram and his grandson Lot and his son Haran and his daughter-in-law Sarai and his son Abraham's wife, and then went out with them to the Ur of Chaldeans to go to the land of Canaan. And they came to Haran and dwelt there. So the days of Terah were 205 years, and Terah died in Haran. Yeah, I don't want to dig into 12 yet. Let's end there, but I don't know. The two things that always stand out to me kind of going through this part is large groups of people that are unbelievers gathering are a scary thing. And we had it just recently, right? It's like last Saturday, right? Bangor had their Pride Festival. Tons of people flashing their freedoms in the face of God. And it's gross. Again, I've said it for the last couple of weeks, and I've said it intentionally. Pride is disgusting in any form. We should use the word pleased when we say, like, hey, you made a good choice. I'm pleased with the choice that you made. We'll often say, hey, I'm proud of you. It's different. That kind of pride says, much like the Tower of Babel, we can do whatever we want, and we will do whatever we want. And it doesn't matter what God thinks, but it absolutely 100% matters. Like, I don't even drive into downtown while that stuff's going on, because for me, I see it in it. I can get frustrated, and I can get irritated with it, but ultimately, it just hurts my heart to be so lost. And then to purpose and plot how their will be done, right? And that's what they say about us. They say the same thing, right? You grouped and you gathered together out in Orrington. There was the men's conference. Sheena had posted, she was super excited about how many men were at the men's conference. And she posted it on the Orrington Community Board, and some guy was like, well, that's a scary picture. And or he said, that's frightening, that many people gathered together. He means it's frightening that many believers gathered together. Because they think of us as we're building some militia where we're going to take over the world and kill people, right? That's what they think. Just the FBI got contacted. It's some of that stuff is so stupid. We're gathering together for the same reasons anyone gathers, because we are like-minded believers. We love each other and we want the fellowship. But if your goal is not one common good, right, evil will be done. You gather a gang of people that know no better, have nothing to lose, and you end up in danger. I just heard recently, was it Northern California? Somewhere, California, a whole entire chapter of Hell's Angels got arrested, kidnapping charges and rape and drugs. What started off probably as a group of men some years ago riding together. Why they picked Hell's Angels, I don't know. But it didn't start as let's make the biggest giant motorcycle club we could ever do and commit the most crime possible across the face of this earth. It's not likely, much like Black Lives Matter, right? They're trying to bring awareness initially to crime with police against black people. Why they don't talk about black on black crime always baffles me. But it turns into something else, because over time, this group of people, someone goes, hey, let's do this instead. And a bunch of people start to agree, and then all of a sudden, what started off as something good ends up something poor. And at the Tower of Babel, they start building something. They're like, oh man, look what we can do. They were building with brick, right? They're building strong buildings out of these things. And what do? They're like, how do we twist this? Let's build it to the sky so that we can make a name for ourselves. It's a billboard, ultimately, right? People from miles away will be coming and they'll go, well, there's that tower those people built. We do it. There's a church. That's why I love Calvary Chapels tend to be so small, like the churches. They're just buildings. They're not really usually not big giant steeples or big extravagant things wrapped in gold. I got to, some years ago, I got to go see the Yankees play at the old Yankee Stadium. I'm a big-time Yankees fan. If you guys want to leave the church, I get it. I've been a Yankees fan since I was a little kid, and I always wanted to see them play. And so I was living out in California, and they're building a new stadium, and their last season, my cousin's like, man, we should really go. We should get together. And Shannon's like, look, you should do it. You guys, there's 4 of us. We flew to New York City, hung out there for a couple of days, went and saw Yankees play at Yankee Stadium. It was awesome. We were literally in the last seats on the top, nosebleeds. It's 110 degrees that day. All of us sunburned, no hats, nothing, no sunscreen, just frying up there. They played 13 innings and they won. And it was neat because the perspective we had looking at it, you're like, you see this baseball stadium and you see these guys, right? Half those dudes are making hundreds of millions of dollars. But if you look out just where the cameras don't show, and you look over the Bronx, it's all like a war zone. These buildings are broken. They look like bombs have hit them. These projects are all broken down. You walk outside of the stadium, you're supposed to just get right on the train and leave because it's a dangerous place. But then you have this big giant stadium. And then you look the other direction and you see the new Yankee Stadium. It's like marble and gold. It's bigger than the old stadium. It's all fancy, right? People are going to go, well, there they are. That's where all their money goes. It becomes a statement. The Babel, it becomes a statement. And secondarily, verse 30. One sentence can never describe somebody's pain and hurt. Someone says, I could never have kids of my own. I always wanted them. Might be easy to say that sentence, but that's decades and decades of pain and hurt. And that. God's good, right? God has worked in our lives in ways that I could never have imagined. But we can read through all kinds of stuff, and we can read a line in Scripture sometimes and just skip right over it and put ourselves in that place, that position where they were, and go, man, what was that life like? Up until God came and promised a son, Abraham had no hope whatsoever. You just keep trying, and he had a son, but that's a story for a different day.
Thank you for joining us today. We pray that this teaching has been a blessing to you. If you have any questions or would like to request prayer, you can visit us online at www.cccorinth.org. If you're local, come join us for a service at 125 School Road in Charleston, Maine. We want to remind you that the weapons of our warfare are not carnal, but mighty in God. Remain armored up, and until next time, grace and peace.